that people reading is great for their brains. And it's one of the ways in which we not only learn important sort of non-recognized skills like empathy and understanding, but you also keep your brain healthy and sharp and happy. I know you've written many different books. This one is getting a lot of buzz, though. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about how you write and how it is you take a concept in your head and transfer it into your reader's mind.
If I could, I'd like to focus on character with that, because I began to realize that it's something it's really hard to get your fingers around. It's like Mercury. I mean, characters are just really sort of magical little creatures, and the best metaphor I've been able to come up with it is that a character is, in a certain sense, a visual and an emotional chord. And I think, you know, like simple characters very often can be just a triad, or maybe just a dyad, maybe like a fourth and the tonic, or maybe the third and the tonic, or the fifth and the tonic. And then you add, you know, like a third, or a sixth, or a flattened sixth, or a diminished.
I love this musical metaphor.
Well,
it fits so many parts of the brain.
Well, it does, and also you find that I just find that what you do when you start with a character, you usually start with an image. And I tell my students that the name of your character is one of the most important things. It needs to conjure something to you. If it does, the rest of what you write with respect to that character will probably convey that image. Even if in somebody else's brain that person looks different, there'll be a consistency, and that will feed their image as well as it resonates with your own. I mean, you never can tell what the actual image is in somebody else's brain, so you just have to trust your own. So the name is really important. I think that gives you your first initial triad. But then you add things, and I tell my students that secrets and contradictions are the things that bring a character to life most vividly. We know our own secrets, but we don't know anyone else's, because that's why they're secrets. But we have a tendency to see other people's contradictions more clearly than our own, because we perceive ourselves as whole. So somebody who can be tyrannical in one moment and then very funny and engaging in another, we see that really clearly. We react to it very strongly because we're looking for some type of consistency. But you know, the other person just says, "That's just me." You know, yeah, sometimes I do this, sometimes I do that, but it's, you know, they don't see that kind of difference. And I find that when you add a contradiction, that first triad, let's say that's your diminished seventh, you know, and then you add a secret. That's an interesting bass note that you weren't expecting. Maybe instead of being the tonic underneath, it's the third or a sixth or something, and it ends this odd little off-balance characteristic, and you begin to build a character that way. And I've just found that that's the only metaphor that works for me.
That's amazing.
As far as building a character is concerned.
You know, I've heard it said, I can't remember who said it, that in a lot of today's writing, there are characters put in extreme situations, but there aren't characters with extreme traits. Do you think that is true of your character development?
No, not for mine. I always try to make my characters, I always give them a little something, even if I don't put it in a book. In this most recent one, I have an 18-year-old named Roque Montalvo, and he's a genius. He's a guitarist who's a phenom. They're calling him the next Carlos Santana. And he's the youngest, which I was, in a family of boys. So he's sort of got the noble victim to him. And I found, as I was writing, I realized that there's something missing. And what was missing was cruelty.
Oh, wow. You don't see that often in characters these days.
Well, I just knew that anybody who's been picked on as much as he has, like me, every now and then there's going to be this flash of wanting to lash out at somebody else. Yeah. So I envisioned an incident of cruelty that makes him ashamed and guilty, but was also empowering. Because for once he wasn't the victim, but he has just sort of shoved it away. But I needed that because it was a quality he was going to need in the book to prove that he had whatever it took to accomplish what he needed to accomplish. That he wasn't just going to become this sort of blank slate, or he wasn't going to become passive in the face of aggression. That he was going to know how to respond.
And he had experience.
Yeah, and there was an active side to the predation. He wasn't just the little one who always got picked on.
Yeah.
And I don't know how these things happen, but when you're writing, every now and then you'll sense a lack in your character. And you'll have to find, again, it was a secret. He needed a secret, and he needed a cruel secret, a dark one, that he did not want divulged. And it was crucial to making him come alive, in particular for me. And I've been really gratified with this book. A lot of people have said the characters have stayed with them. What's different for this book
And
is the characters have stayed with me.
I was about to ask that. What you seem to be describing is this musical metaphor, and to take it a step further, it's something that resonates with you, like a tuning fork.
Well, and it does, and what I've done more in this book than I've done in other ones is I was very attuned to the fact that what right do I, as a Midwestern, white mutt, have to write from the point of view of a Salvadoran American family? And I know a Salvadoran American family very well, so I mean I wouldn't have even tried it if that weren't true. But when you're creating characters, they're going to be different than real people. So I had to, as I've said to my students, you have to see yourself reflected in the character and the character reflected in you.
The universality of things.
Well, you have to draw.
Personalizing.
Yes, personalizing. You have to bring something from within yourself to the character, not just things from the outside, and they have to sort of blend. And I used my father. I used my own experience as a musician when I was younger, and also being the youngest in a family of boys for my protagonist. I used a woman I grew up with who, was the only woman in a family of men, and who knew that she had to, how strong she had to be, and she was. And there's an aunt in this book who's basically the matriarch for the family. Yeah. And her nickname is Tia Lucha, which means fight or struggle, and so everybody calls her Tia Lucha. And that was really, I find that because of that, in personal investment in these characters, they continue to live for me in a way that my other characters haven't. And it's really kind of interesting.
So one of the things people like the most about books, and it stimulates them the most, is stepping outside their everyday.
Right.
And in an interesting way, what you just described is making the everyday so specific that it resonates, and then you can take it and put it in a setting that isn't familiar.
It is, yes, it's personalizing the unfamiliar. It's taking yourself to a place where you wouldn't normally be. But by lending yourself to there, you bring your emotions to that event, so they're fleshed out in terms of their emotional content, how much they matter to the individual characters. And I think that's really key. I do think people want to be taken to another place, but Robert Stone once said that he thinks people read because they're lonely. And that living through another character is a way.
I would disagree with that.
Well, a lot of people would.
I know.
But that's Bob.
I know. Maybe he was lonely. I'm surrounded by people, and I love to read as an escape.
Well, what I find is I think of them almost as like thought experiments, but I think they're emotional experiments.
Yeah.
It's like, what if?
If there's no emotion, it doesn't work.
Well, if there's no emotion, it's not engaging.
Yeah.
But it is what you do is you create a hypothetical situation which reflects the real world. But you say, well, what if these circumstances existed and these people were involved in this? What would happen? And you set that in motion, and your reader gets to go along with it and gets to basically vicariously live through these characters, through this situation they normally would not find themselves in.
And that gets back to my first point, which is things like emotional intelligence. There's the whole Joseph Campbell thing that we humans are hardwired to hear stories and tell stories in a very stereotyped way, and that there is a way in which we must have them to be able to achieve certain human things, like change or empathy.
Well, there's a great
do you think people get more emotionally intelligent in terms of empathy and other skills through reading?
Oh, absolutely.
Because that's the most striking thing about this book of yours, is how it's a story that isn't told. It's not a story that's sort of in all these mainstream books. It's not like you wrote another Harry Potter or Twilight kind of character or situation.
I wanted people to understand what it takes to get to America now. And I wanted to do it through the eyes of someone who's actually an American, who's, he's a Latino kid, but he was born in the United States. He thinks of himself as an American, except he just, he comes from a Latino family. He speaks Spanish at home with his tia and his tio, but he speaks English with his brother and with his friends. And to take this person and to put him in the situation of the people still trying to get here, and what does he have to learn, and what does he have to overcome? And I felt that was a way to make him an everyman that we could all sympathize with. And so that was, instead of taking somebody to a different place, of course they do, they go to El Salvador and Guatemala and Mexico, but I put them in a moral situation in which, what if I were there? What choices would I make?
And it's not an easy situation.
It's not easy at all.
Yeah.
And he's changed forever by what he sees and what he has to do.
Well, I would highly recommend it, and I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us, because it's an interesting and fascinating process.
Dr. Gurley, I would talk to you about anything, anytime.
You're so kind.